Okay, so I'm going to start by sharing the screen with you. And this is the assignment page. And you can see that this is a monochromatic image. It's all in one color. There's probably some light green that's used to change the values in here, white and black to lighten and darken. So this is done with a magenta color, so you can see that the darkened colors sort of tend a little bit towards the purple when black and white is added. So remember, monochromatic color is one color. So I'm going to share the screen of the drawing that I chose to turn into a monochromatic image. So it's the watermelon by Wayne Thiebaud. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do over here. So basically, I have a larger set of Prismacolor. So what I did was I just took out the same colors that you have. I also have some blenders. You made a blender, so you can use that. Or if you have professional ones, you can use those. You'll need your kneadable eraser, something to sharpen, your pencils, because you can also use your charcoal pencil and your white pastel pencil. I might have a different brand than you have, but it's still a white pastel pencil and a charcoal pencil. I also printed my image in black and white so that I can see my darkest values are here in the knife, here on the darker green, and in the shadows, the occlusion shadows here. So one of the things that the assignment tells you is that you have to cover your entire sheet with pastel. So it's a minimum 12 by 12. What I have here is a 12 by 14, so it's just slightly larger than the minimum size. I recommend printing this out because what's going to be important is the value. Okay, we got a delivery. All right, so the values are what you want to go by, and that's what you're going to emphasize. You're going to be using one color. But you can use the complementary color to darken it and to change the values. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide what color I'm going to use. I thought about using red, but I don't really like the red option that I have. It's more of a magenta pink, so I'm going to use blue because blue is a cool color and watermelon is something I think of as being cooling. So these are the two blues I have. You can use different shades of the same color. To darken blue, I would use orange. So I'm going to test it out and see how I want to get my darkest values, because I can also use black and white. So if I'm using this blue that's more of a blue-green, this blue is more of a red blue, but that's okay. So let's see what happens if I add. And you might have already done some of this, but I would recommend doing it again before you get started on your actual drawing. So I'm mixing both of the blues in here with this orange to see how to get my darkest value that's still a dark blue. So that's pretty dark blue, and that's mixing both of these. I'm going to try just using that. Yes, that one. You don't want it to end up looking orange. You want it to end up looking a darker blue. I think that this is a cleaner color using just these two for my dark blue. So for darkening this blue with just the orange, I can get another value probably. And still have it retain the blue hue instead of being orangish. So those are my darkest colors. For the light, I can do this with the white. So I can get very light. I can also lighten this one. And it really points out when you lighten them the difference. This is more of an ultramarine blue. This is more of a phthalo blue. If you think about your watercolors, leaning towards the yellow, leaning towards the red. So these are the colors I'm going to use. This is, you know, so orange-ish. If you wanted to try using that to give yourself more values, you could test it. But I don't think that works well because that's going to just make it go more towards green, especially with this stick. If you try it with this stick, it's still going to be more of a green. So I don't recommend using that. You stick with this orange. So one of the things is that I really recommend having a wet rag around because you're going to have a lot of powder and you don't want to really blow it around. So I'm just going to set this aside. And so now I have a wet rag. I can sort of mop up, just like cleaning my hands. If you have allergies, these are not toxic. If you look on the Prismacolor, it has this AP conforms to the normal standard of non-toxic materials. So you still don't want to be inhaling it. If you can do this outdoors, that's a good idea. So bring back this, and I think the first thing I want to do is maybe put down some background. No, because it's going to get too dusty and messy. So this is going to be, what I'm going to do, I think, is use this shade of blue on the interior of the watermelon and then use this shade of blue on the exterior. I think I'm going to work on the interior part of the melon first and start putting down some blue, and it's darker here. Use it on edge. And you don't want to try to just put a little bit down and then spread it. You want to actually have rich color. So I'm going to put white down with it. And it's lighter, it gets lighter around here, lighter on this side, darker on that side. So I'm going to push some of the blue in that direction. And I want it to blend nicely, not just seen where the lines where I actually put the color down. And I'm going to take my scrap paper and kind of just down. So that pencil mark is where one of my seeds is. I use my fingers just because it's easy. You can use a blender. If you try to use paper towel or tissue, it's probably going to smear, but what you can use is your chamois. If you have a chamois that doesn't have a lot of black on it. So chamois are also a good tool for this assignment. So the top part is darker, and I'm going to use the same blue here. And in here there is a bit of a line, a dark area here, so I'm going to put that in a little bit darker there. And there's some white edge on the watermelon. So then here's the darker value that is the shadow. And what I'll do is put in, I think, some of this for this shadow. And then use a blender because my fingers are kind of fat for that. Did I hit record? Yes. Gonna ignore that. So this side was a little bit lighter. It's a little bit darker over here. And you want to get rich color, so you want to keep putting down and not just try to smear it to cover the page. Actually use more of your pastel. And this gets a little bit lighter towards me, so I'm going to use some of the white here. And it's not like there's a harsh line where the red of the watermelon meets the white part. In mine, it's blue, not white. I mean, blue, not red. So I'm going to start to put some of that in. And I'm going to just put down most of my color and then come back and put more detail in. So for this part, I'm going to put in a light value sort of everywhere. My darkest value is going to be here. And this is sort of one of the darker stripes here. And another one here. And also at the top. So right now I'm just using the pastels, and at the end I would use the pencils for the finer detail. I didn't really want to get this shade into there, so I might lift that with my kneadable eraser. And I don't want to blow it. Now I can come back in with some of the wider area. And this should have some hints of this blue in it here. So these are my darkest areas. Part of that should be shadow. See if I can find my other eraser. So you can use your eraser, also your regular eraser. Shouldn't have blown it, but I did. So I think now I'm going to mix in for some darker here value. And since this is reflecting from there, I'm going to use this for the shadow, but you can see the shadow is darker and then it lightens. So I'm going to start blending this with the white here. And here I'm going to use my fingers. And the shadow of the knife is not any different than the rest of the shadow. So that's just going to continue there. And that's kind of light. I'm going to have to get that darkened. I don't like the way I can see where the blue was put down. And this was darker shadow. I know these pastels are somewhat chunky, but you can use them on edge to get sharp edges. I'm going to use my kneadable eraser and take off some of this. Maybe I'll use my other eraser. I taped the edges so that when I'm done and I pull off the tape, I'll have sharp edges around the paper. You don't have to do that. So there's not really a definitive line. So I'm going to try to lessen that. It sort of blends in. And maybe I do have a little bit more value here. So I'm going to do the work on the shadow a bit. That's a little rough. So that's more to my liking. And here. So maybe there's a little bit more lightness in here. Instead of using my kneadable, I'm just going to add some white chalk or white pastel. And I can see some orange there. I'm going to cover that up. This is too highlighted here. So I think now I'm going to deal with the knife. Maybe what I'll do for the knife is blend for this part of the knife that's pretty light. I might use both of these colors. So there seems to be shadow in here. So maybe I should use the darker blue for that. That's the wrong one, this one. And the handle is very dark. I'm going to this time use the orange on the bottom and leave those areas of the sort of metal highlights of the hardware of the knife. And I'm going to use the darker blue now to go over that. So I can clean that up a little. Eraser.
These are lighter. There seems to be lighter here, darker on this side, so you might try putting in some of this blue on this side just to lighten it a hint. And I'm going to use my pencil here. And this is the black charcoal, and I'm just sort of cleaning up the edges using this black pencil, because the white pencil would be too light. That's a bit light. Might tone those down a bit. So now I'm going to do the background, and what I'm going to try to do is use this shade of blue coming up and then this shade of blue coming down. So I'm going to have a really light background, more like white. So I did it backwards. I wanted this one at the bottom. I'll just make that darker. So the reason I wanted this one at the bottom was so that it would contrast with the shadow. And this blue up here. So I am going to do a little bit of this before I add the white. And you wouldn't want to just leave your drawing like this. You want to have rich color, which means that you're going to then take your white and blend the blue with the white. And maybe I need just a tad more blue here on one. You don't want to leave halos around the edges. So I'm pushing this background color all the way to the edges of the form I have. And this needs more white. And maybe a little bit more of the contrasting blue. You don't have to use both blues. If you want, you can just use one of them. I just used both to give me a little bit of contrast between the interior of the watermelon and the exterior part of the watermelon. It's similar to charcoal in that it's additive and subtractive. You can add it and you can subtract it. So I think I'm gonna put some white highlights on here just to separate this. And these edges need some work. Don't like that I can still see the pencil. Might go over that with my white pencil here. This shadow kind of comes to the edge. I chose this simple form so that I can have most of it done by the end of this session. And don't like the splotchiness here. Do want to have more of this color. So when I look at this, I'm going to see that I have some edges there, and I'm going to use this to give me those edges, the black charcoal pencil. But first, I'm going to narrow this, looks too wide, the thickness there. And this does blend in a little here. And wrong color. I want a sharp edge. I went too far here. And blend some of this out. Put them in with the dark blue first. These are seeds. And I think these are too prominent. It's good to have some higher contrast, but I feel like they're sticking out a bit too much. So might just tone them down a bit by dabbing some white on there. So I could work on it more. I think this gives you the general idea of what you're going for. I do think that this could use more detail in these areas. And you could just leave it like that. You don't have to blend everything, but you want to make sure that overall your values appear sort of equivalent to the drawing that you're reproducing. So I shouldn't have blown that. I blew it. It's kind of old habits die hard. So I feel like this white back here is a little too white. So I'm gonna get the pastel that I have on my hands off my hands. Dry my hand a bit on another rag, on a dry rag. And maybe come in and soften the white. Over here. I'm looking for my charcoal pencil. I think this needs a little more work. Don't like the black showing so much. I got a drop of water on there. Best to just pick that up. And maybe whiten this a little bit more. So you can keep adding or subtracting, enhancing what you have. And I think I'm going to end there. So monochromatic, I used some orange for my darkest darks. I used white. I have my entire page covered. I'm going to scoot off some of that, wipe my hands with the wet rag first and then the dry one before I try to take off the tape. And actually what I'm going to do is use the wet rag and kind of just get some of the powder off the tape. So it didn't take me very long to do this. It's a simple form. I would encourage you to do something that you feel an affinity to. And don't just try to do it because it looks like the easiest thing. Oh, I pushed my tape down too hard. You can see how it's pulling up on this paper. So this is just the drawing paper. If you have pastel paper has a little bit of a tooth and you can deposit more pastel on it. This smooth paper, after a while, you just get powder. So monochromatic drawing of Wayne Thiebaud's watermelon.